everybody, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. I want to cover a few topics today. I want to take a look at unfortunately, the new schism taking place within Eastern Orthodoxy, as well as an update to the new deaconess in Eastern Orthodoxy. Looks like we have an answer to the question of whether or not she was sacramentally ordained in Eastern Orthodoxy. We're going to take a look at that. I also want to take a look at a few comments actually from NASA. So shifting gears from Eastern Orthodoxy and church politics to something that they've done for Pride Month. So I want to briefly take a look at that towards the end of the show. Let's start out, however, with what the Moscow Patriarchate has said on their website. I'm going to share my screen so you can follow along with me. Here you should be able to see it. This is Google Translate version. So obviously this was originally written in Russian, and so Google is going to translate it into English for us, but I'm sure it's a little wonky, so bear with me. Okay, so the Holy Synod stated the impossibility of concelebrating with the hierarchs of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church who entered into church communion with schismatics. So what's going on here? Well, what we've seen in Eastern Orthodoxy is the Patriarchate of Moscow with Constantinople. And it has done so because Constantinople has recognized a group of Ukrainian Orthodox as a valid church, and Moscow believes that they're schismatics. So Moscow is on board with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, but not the Orthodox Church of Ukraine that Constantinople recognizes. And so several years ago, Moscow broke communion with Constantinople. So we started to see a schism within Eastern Orthodoxy, an internal schism, a partial schism, because some Orthodox churches are in communion with Moscow, and some who are in communion with Moscow are also in communion with Constantinople, but Moscow doesn't recognize Constantinople. And so what Moscow has been saying is, well, any of you guys who go and celebrate with what they deem to be Ukrainian schismatics, you too are schismatic. So when Constantinople does it, bam, they're in schism. When Alexandria does it, Moscow has said they're in schism. When Bulgaria does it, they say they're in schism. And so Moscow doesn't recognize Constantinople, Alexandria, Bulgaria, and I think there's even some others that I just don't recall off the top of my head, but this is causing a bigger and bigger and bigger schism within Eastern Orthodoxy. It's not getting better. It's not being healed. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And it really surrounds a debate on the question of what is the role of the Patriarch of Constantinople? Does he have the authority to recognize a certain group as a church or not? Is this something that has to be determined by all of Orthodoxy, or can just Constantinople do it? So there's a debate here kind of on primacy that is very much reminiscent of some of those debates that took place in the first millennium with the Patriarch of Rome, the Pope. And so they're still struggling with the question of headship in Eastern Orthodox ecclesiology. In Catholicism, we've settled this long ago. We settled them, in fact, at the ecumenical councils in the first millennium, the Sixth Ecumenical Council, Seventh Ecumenical Council. Orthodoxy, I would argue, is inconsistent because these issues have already been settled in favor of Rome in the Catholic understanding of the papacy in the very ecumenical councils that they profess to hold to. Which is one of the problems with Orthodoxy and why I say it's internally inconsistent, which you can find out more information about that in this book right here, Answering Orthodoxy, where I wrote all sorts of responses to Eastern Orthodox objections to Catholicism, and I cover that question of primacy in the first millennium. Well, they still haven't worked through those issues because they've abandoned the teachings of these ecumenical councils in the first millennium on headship. So they're still working through that, but they're having to do so in a way that opposes Rome. So they're working through questions of, okay, New Rome, Constantinople, what is its authority? Constantinople seems to have a pretty high view of itself, whereas Moscow has a very low view of Constantinople. And so This isn't an issue that is going away in Eastern Orthodoxy, and it's not going to go away with a new patriarch of Constantinople or a new patriarch of Moscow, because behind these controversies are debates in Eastern Orthodox ecclesiology. What is the proper understanding of the nature of the church in Eastern Orthodoxy? So it's just getting worse and worse and worse, which I would say is a bad news for everyone all around. It's bad news for the Orthodox, obviously, but for Catholics, no, it's not good news for us. Y'all might think, well, see, this vindicates us. In a sense, it does vindicate Catholic ecclesiology, because the papacy is able to resolve disputes. It is able to hold groups into communion. Now, if someone wants to break away from it, fine, but we can clearly say what the church is, those who are in communion with Rome. It's a little harder to do that with Orthodoxy. Is it those who are in communion with Constantinople? Is it those who are in communion with Moscow? It's not as clear cut. So in that sense, yes, it vindicates Catholicism, but that's not necessarily a good thing for Catholics, because if we want reunion with the Orthodox, you need a united Orthodox to have negotiations with, to have dialogue with. Back when we had the Western Schism in the 1400s, when the Orthodox were negotiating dialogue with us at the Council of Florence, they had to make a decision. Are they going to negotiate with the communion of Catholic bishops who are in communion with Eugene IV, or are they going to negotiate with some of these other guys out there? Whether we're talking again about during the time of the Western Schism or the time of the Council of Florence, where you have rival councils, you have the Council of Basel and you have the Council of Florence, who were the Orthodox to negotiate with? Well, they ended up going with those who are in communion with Pope Eugene IV. So kind of similarly, it's a little difficult for us to have negotiations with them if they're divided. Who do we have negotiations with? Those who are in communion with Constantinople, those who are in communion with Moscow. And if we have some kind of resolution with Constantinople, that's not going to apply to Moscow while they're divided. So there has to be something that fixes that situation. Now, in the Catholic Church, with the Western Schism and also with these other issues with the Council of Basel and Florence and all that, which one's legitimate, which one's not, which sessions are legitimate, which sessions are not. Ultimately, what settled it was papal primacy. But you don't have that kind of structure in Eastern Orthodoxy. So I don't know how this issue could be resolved in Eastern Orthodoxy. Unfortunately, I think it will continue to fragment. We already have Eastern Orthodoxy, we have Oriental Orthodoxy, we have Assyrian Church of the East. And so we already have to negotiate with these various groups. And now within Orthodoxy, we're seeing more of a fragmentation. What are we going to have maybe 100, 200 years from now? Two Eastern Orthodox groups that are completely divided. That's most likely going to be the case. And you'll have one group that claims to be the true Eastern Orthodox Church and another who claims to be the true Eastern Orthodox Church, but they're no longer in communion at all with each other. And so then we have to have negotiations with all these other different groups. It makes it harder to bring about Christian unity. So this is a loss for everybody. This is why I say it's heartbreaking when I see this, when I see Moscow doing this. Now, Moscow puts the blame on Constantinople and says it's their fault, and it's the fault of the Bulgarians, and it's the fault of Alexandria. It's their fault, not our fault. But from where I sit, it really looks to me like it's actually Moscow who is problematic. Now, of course, Moscow has been trying to effectively create its own communion by going into now the territory of Alexandria and trying to set up churches in somebody else's patriarchate. Are they going to now do that with Bulgaria as well? Go and create their own little missions within Bulgaria because, hey, Bulgaria is not in communion anymore, so we can set up shop there. I don't know how this is going to work, but let's take a look at their statement. It says, on May 30th, 2024, participants in the meeting of the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church heard a report from the chairman of the Department for External Church Relations, Metropolitan Anthony of Volokolamsk, on the celebration of the hierarchs of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church with representatives of the Ukrainian schismatic communities. So the OCU, they're going to say, look, OCU isn't legitimate. We only recognize UOC. So for the Bulgarians to go and celebrate with these schismatics, they're part of the schism as well. On May 19th, 2024, at the Valukli Monastery in Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople, the Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople led the liturgy, which was attended by representatives of one of the schismatic structures operating in Ukraine. Schismatics according to Russia, not according to Constantinople and others. So Orthodoxy is kind of divided. Are they schismatic or are they not? Depends on which group in Orthodoxy that you ask. Among those who celebrated were the hierarchs of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Nicholas, Metropolitan Cyprian, Metropolitan Jacob, Bishop Zion, and Bishop Vissarion. Now, they're from, again, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, celebrating with, in Constantinople, Patriarch Bartholomew, and present are bishops from the group that Moscow believes is schismatic in Ukraine, and their bishops are also celebrating. So they're all celebrating alongside. And so they're like, okay, well, you're celebrating with schismatics, you're schismatic yourself. But it's like, okay, according to whom? They're schismatics according to Moscow, but not according to Constantinople. And who can really settle this issue? The Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church expressed deep sorrow due to the fact that the hierarchs of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church participated in a concelebration with representatives of one of the Ukrainian schismatic groups, which caused serious damage to relations between the Russian and Bulgarian Orthodox churches. The meeting participants stated the impossibility of concelebrating with the mentioned hierarchs who had entered into church communion with schismatics. See, again, in Catholicism, how do you know who's in schism? Those who depart from communion with the Catholic Church, specifically communion with the Pope. So if you're not in communion with the Bishop of Rome, you're in schism. And however, in Orthodoxy, you don't have that kind of standard. It's not like, okay, you know you're in schism if you're not in communion with the Patriarch of Constantinople. No, they don't have that kind of standard. So they don't have that center of unity. So it's a little harder to determine, okay, where is the schism? It says it was noted with regret that the Patriarch of Constantinople continues to take actions at deepening division in Orthodoxy. So Russia is saying, no, it's Constantinople that is deepening division, not us. Whereas others are going to say, no, it's Moscow who's, deepening the division, not Constantinople. And it kind of depends on the question of, okay, who has the authority to recognize communions in Orthodoxy? Is it the Patriarch of Constantinople, or is it the whole group of Orthodoxy? Depends on who you ask. Moscow's going to say, no, Constantinople doesn't have that authority on its own, even though, oddly enough, Moscow got its status from recognition by Constantinople. So there's definitely some underlying inconsistency here with their own existence when they adopt this position. So some are going to say it's Moscow being divisive. Some are going to say it is Constantinople being divisive. But nonetheless, this further deepens divisions within Orthodoxy. Even more interestingly, in a plot twist, during this liturgy, Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, with, again, the Ukrainian representatives present, the Ukrainians who are not on good terms with Patriarch Kirill, commemorates during the liturgy Patriarch Kirill. You remember during the liturgy in the Catholic Church, we will pray for the Pope, for Francis, our Pope, so-and-so, our Bishop. In the Eastern Catholic churches, we say Francis, the Bishop of Rome, and then whoever the Archbishop is, or maybe the Bishop, just kind of depending on what the structure is. There will be a kind of a shout out during the liturgy to the various hierarchs that we're in communion with. And there's always a shout out for the Pope, no matter where you are. If you're a Catholic, there's always a shout out for the Pope and the local bishop. Well, they kind of have the same thing in Orthodoxy. They give a shout out to whoever they're in communion with. So oddly enough, Constantinople gives a shout out to Moscow, Patriarch Kirill. Now, Kirill's not in communion with him, but he, that is Bartholomew from Constantinople, recognizes Kirill. So he wants to say, hey, I'm not in schism with you. You're in schism with me, but I'm not in schism with you. So during this liturgy, oddly enough, he commemorates Kirill, which is even weirder because the Ukrainians present that are not recognized by Kirill, they're not on good terms with Kirill. So in a weird way, now these Ukrainians are commemorating Patriarch Kirill. So there's an article about this by the Union of Orthodox Journalists, Fanar Media. Thanks to Bartholomew, OCU, this is the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the group that Kirill doesn't recognize and thinks are schismatics. OCU reps commemorated Patriarch Kirill in a weird plot twist. Let's see. The media reported that representatives of the OCU, Zoria and Latish, thanks to Patriarch Bartholomew, commemorated Patriarch Kirill at the liturgy. The publication serves as an unofficial mouthpiece of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. And it reported that at the patriarchal liturgy, it was heard that the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew mentions Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. It's a massive plot twist. Almost as interesting as that recent Orthodox bishop on his ordination ceremony, where he actually mentions the filioque during the creed. Y'all remember that show? I have a show specifically on that. Go and watch it. Orthodox Patriarch says the filioque in the creed at his ordination ceremony. This is almost as interesting as that. Ukrainians, thanks to the Ecumenical Patriarch, commemorated their executioner, it says. Because again, not only does Kirill not recognize these Ukrainians there, in many ways he's working against them. It should be noted that the word commemorated in the original is used to denote a priest's prayer for his ruling bishop, or a ruling bishop's prayer for a patriarch or metropolitan, and a patriarch's prayer for other patriarchs. Thus, it refers to a prayer, not just a mention. So it's a shout out and a prayer at the same time. The news source wrote that the OCU officially asked Patriarch Bartholomew to condemn Kirill for his entire position of the Ukrainian issue and to isolate him until he refrains from his uncompromising position. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he gives them a shout out while the Ukrainians are there, and of course, while the Bulgarians are there. And they are right. So much trouble from the ideology of Holy Rus. Russia is really coming with this Ruski Mir, this paradigm, what some Orthodox would consider to be a heresy, that it's somehow Russian Orthodoxy that is the savior of Orthodoxy. But the Ecumenical Patriarch does not have the KGB logic that Metropolitan Antony has. He waits, he knows, because from the very beginning of his patriarchal ministry, he has been striving for pan-Orthodox unity, which Moscow is shaking to its core. So it's kind of a weird situation. I'll put a link to this one in the show notes as well. This is from orthochristian.com that has a brief article on it, kind of reiterating some of the same things that we just saw directly from Moscow Patriarchate. So we'll see how this develops, but like I said, it's bad news for everyone all around, because again, it further fragments Eastern Orthodoxy, which is not good for them. And it also isn't good for us in the Catholic Church, because we want reunion with all Christians, especially the Orthodox, because we're the closest to them, or they're the closest to us, I should say, since we are the fullness of the church. We are the church Jesus established. The church subsists in the Catholic Church. They have broken away from that. But, when it comes to sacraments, when it comes to teachings, the unity is closest with the Eastern Orthodox. And so we really want reunion with all, especially with the Orthodox. But how are we going to have that when they're further dividing with each other, when they're further fragmented with developments like this? Another thing that further divides the Catholic Church and the Orthodox churches. In the Catholic Church, we don't believe that women can be sacramentally ordained. So the Catholic Church understands deaconesses in the Bible and in the early church to be a non-sacramental role, even though there was laying on of hands, even though there is an invocation of the Holy Spirit, even though there are certain prayers that were very similar to the prayers for a deacon. We would still say, but fundamentally, we're going to see this as distinct from the sacramental character that a deacon receives, a male deacon receives upon ordination. Oddly enough, however, it seems that the Eastern Orthodox, beginning with the Alexandrian Patriarchate, are starting to ordain deaconesses. Now, we saw a few years ago, the Patriarch of Alexandria ordained like 6 deaconesses. But there was a question of, okay, is this a sacramental role? Is this a non-sacramental diaconate? What exactly is this? Well, we got an answer because Eastern Orthodoxy, within the Patriarchate of Alexandria, sees an introduction of another deaconess angelic. And it's very clear in this particular case in the Orthodox Church in Zimbabwe that the bishop who did this within the Patriarchate of Alexandria, it's very clear this is a sacramental ordination, because she does everything that a male deacon does, and it's the exact ordination ceremony of a male deacon. So if a male deacon is sacramentally a deacon, it's going to be the exact same thing for a female deaconess in Eastern Orthodoxy, because it's not like they're saying, no, it's the same prayer, but we're making a distinction or something. There's none of that. She's doing exactly what a male deacon does, and it's exactly the same ordination ceremony that a male deacon undergoes. So this is going to be a massive, I think, plot twist, because if they now are starting to introduce female deacons and they believe they're sacramental, how are we going to have reunion with the Orthodox when we can't agree on the basics of the sacraments of holy orders? That then might introduce later on down the road female priests and maybe even female bishops in Eastern Orthodoxy. Not anytime soon. I don't suspect anytime soon, but maybe 100 years from now, you might start to see that. Because if deaconesses can be sacramentally ordained, what is to stop them from saying priests can be sacramentally ordained and priests can be females and bishops can be females, and it's all sacramental in nature? So it's kind of the way that the Anglicans ended up going. We're starting to see that with Orthodoxy. I think it's going to, the Anglicans went there quickly. I don't think you're going to see it quickly with Eastern Orthodoxy. I think it'll take time, 50, 100 years from now, but you're going to see this conforming more to modernity in Eastern Orthodoxy. Whereas in Catholicism, we have some guardrails. It's infallibly taught women cannot be priests in ordinatio sacerdotalis. That's not going away. That's infallible. So any kind of diaconate that we're talking about for women is also likely not going to be considered sacramental in nature. Okay, so here's the proof for that, because the big question that I had is this considered sacramental within the Patriarchate of Alexandria? I didn't have an answer until now. Public Orthodoxy just posted this. On Holy Thursday, May 2nd, 2024, Angelic Molin, pronounced Angelic, was ordained to the diaconate in Zimbabwe. The Orthodox Church in Zimbabwe is part of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Alexandria, which Moscow currently doesn't recognize. Moscow says that Alexandria is in schism. Alexandria and all Africa, with the approval and support of the Alexandrian Synod and his Beatitude Patriarch Theodorus, His Eminence Metropolitan Seraphim of Zimbabwe, laid hands on Deaconess Angelic in St. Nectarius Mission Parish at Waterfall. So this is within the Alexandrian Patriarchate. It's not, Moscow, it's not Bulgaria, it's specifically within the Alexandrian Patriarchate. And we've seen him, that is the Patriarch of Alexandria, ordain some, and now we're seeing somebody within his Patriarchate, Metropolitan Seraphim, ordaining Deaconess Angelic, which he then makes also Archdeaconess Angelic. And then the question is, okay, is it sacramental or not? Here's the answer. It was my blessing and honor to witness and celebrate the ordination along with my oldest daughter. And shouts of Axia. Normally they say Axios. He is worthy upon one's ordination. Since she's a woman, they say Axia. Here I will offer the details of the ordination. Deaconess Angelic is respected, central, and beloved member of Orthodox community of St. Nectarius Mission Parish, and she has been doing diaconal ministry for over a decade prior to this ordination. She first came to the Orthodox Church with a friend when she was 11, and shortly thereafter, her entire family converted. From that early age, Deaconess Angelic has been deeply involved in the pastoral care of the people of St. Nectarius. She oversees many initiatives, including organizing and maintaining a chicken raising program that provides chickens and eggs for members of the community in need. That's pretty cool. Overseeing and teaching catechesis, organizing mothers groups, and representing the Zimbabwean Orthodox Church at an ecological and ecumenical events, including the World Council of Churches and Faith Leaders Environmental Advocacy Training. This is because, again, within Eastern Orthodoxy, especially in communion with Patriarch Bartholomew, there's a big emphasis on ecology and the environment, much like you find with Pope Francis. She is working towards a degree in geography and environmental studies at the University of Zimbabwe. Prior to the ordination, she went through a training and preparation process with formal prayers and instruction from Metropolitan Seraphim. The ordination took place on May 2nd at St. Nectarius Parish. St. Nectarius is a growing parish of more than 200 souls, more than half of which are children. The parish property includes a church, a school, a church office, a kitchen, and ample playground equipment and room for the children. Men and women children attended the ordination, but fewer men, and because the morning service conflicted with the workday. The service began with a choir in front of the church alongside the reader's stand. Throughout the service, little children trickled up to the front to lean on and hold hands with their mothers in the choir. The children throughout the church laughed, keened, sang, and shuffled throughout the service. These are the mellifluous noises of a vibrant parish. Both altar boys and altar girls served that morning. Yes, within parts of Eastern Orthodoxy, you have female altar service. Just before the Divine Liturgy on May 2nd, Metropolitan Seraphim tonsured Deaconess Angelic as a reader and a subdeaconess immediately after, which was the ordination itself took place, as ordinations do during the liturgy at the altar. Here's the key. The ordination service was the rite used for deacons, so it's the exact same rite that is used for deacons, and it specifically tells us which service book, so we can actually go and read it. I have an electronic copy, a physical copy. We can go and look and read through it. The service book of the Holy Orthodox Catholic Apostolic Church, published by the Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese of North America in 1918, based on the Isabel Florence Hapgood translation from the 1906 of mostly Church Slavonic sources. So it tells us specifically which ordination service, what prayers were said. It is absolutely identical to the exact same one of male deacons, and it's sacramental. It's sacramental. It's holy orders in Orthodoxy. So they're going to consider it sacramental. In the Catholic Church, we don't consider this service to be sacramental because we would say you can't sacramentally ordain females to the diaconate. We would say that you can have a non-sacramental ordination to the diaconate, much like we see in the early church. In the apostolic period, in the Bible, you have deaconesses mentioned, but we understand that to be non-sacramental. We had female deaconesses almost into the second millennium in the Roman Rite, but it was generally considered to be non-sacramental in nature. So the way the Catholic Church would understand this would be these aren't sacramental ordinations. However, Alexandria, and specifically this metropolitan and its patriarch, consider this to be sacramental. Now, you're going to find Orthodox who say, oh, no, we don't accept this. This isn't sacramental. We don't accept it at all. We think this is woke. We think it's modernism. We think it's wrong. You'll find Orthodox who are divided on this issue. So not all Orthodox believe the same thing. But this is going to be a problem because now you're starting to have Orthodox who do this. And now that the door is open and one synod has done it, you're going to start to see other synods doing it in Orthodoxy. The English service book is widely used across Orthodox jurisdictions in the United States. Metropolitan Seraphim chose to use this rite instead of an extant rite for the ordination of a deaconess from the ancient world in the Barberini Codex. So there are other services that you can find in the first millennium for deaconesses. Again, there's a debate on whether or not they're sacramental or not. It seems that Alexandria thinks that they are sacramental. But instead of using some of these other ones from the first millennium, they're just using the current one that is currently used right now for male deacons. And it's because this is the right use for deacons today. This was the natural choice. The only changes made were the masculine pronouns to feminine. So anything in the service that describes, he, it's changed to she. And an addition of reference to St. Phoebe, the woman in St. Paul's letter to the Romans that the church understands to be a prototype for the office of deaconess. That's that reference in the New Testament to deaconesses. During the Divine Liturgy on May 2nd, Deaconess Angelic read petitions, read the gospel. This is what a deacon does. They read the litanies, read the gospel. Sometimes they preach, and then they also distribute Holy Communion. And she also distributed communion to the faithful. We have plenty of pictures of her doing that. Men and women and children. All liturgical roles shared with the deacon. In fact, she participated in these liturgical actions alongside her brother, who was recently ordained Deacon Spiridon. Having spent time with Deaconess Angelic prior to the ordination, I found her to be humble and soft-spoken. She wore the same vestments as a deacon, modified to fit her smaller frame. At the end of the Divine Liturgy, the Metropolitan spoke of the importance of Deaconess Angelic's ministry and stressed that she must be an upright example for all, living life in the light of Christ. He invited everyone to come forward and congratulate the new deaconess, which they did. The sense of contained excitement that has been growing during the ordination now bursts forth. The women of St. Nectaria sang, danced, clapped, and ululated, while everyone swarmed Deaconess Angelic with affection, pride, and affirmation. Deaconess Angelic was in demand after the service. Everyone wanted to talk to her. Because Deaconess Angelic is the first deaconess of our time, not exactly. There was 6 other deacons that the Metropolitan had ordained just a few years ago, so I don't know where that's coming from. Metropolitan Seraphim elevated her to the rank of Archdeaconess on May 4th. At the temporal parish of Panagia of Kikos on the outskirts of Harare, using the relevant prayers in the service book of Holy Orthodox Catholic Apostolic Church. So she's not only a deaconess, she's an archdeaconess. She was given the name Phoebe in honor of the first century saint and thus has the title Archdeaconess Angelic Phoebe. But it seems that she will be called Deaconess Angelic or Sister Angelic. After the prayers for her elevation, she assisted the Metropolitan with baptism of the parish children, a traditional role of the ancient world deaconesses. We do see in the early church women deacons participating in baptisms for females because they were usually done in the nude. So it's kind of inappropriate for a male to baptize a woman in the nude. So usually a woman would do the baptism or assist in the baptism whenever the bishop or the priest did it. Now, again, was that considered sacramental or not? The Catholic Church says no. At this temporal parish, Deaconess Angelic was treated with respect and admiration, and again, many sought to have their photo taken with her. The ordination of Deaconess Angelic was the culmination of worldwide efforts to renew the ancient order of deaconesses in the Orthodox Church. This isn't out of nowhere. It's going to give you kind of a short history. Orthodoxy has been trying to revive deaconesses in Orthodoxy. We're now seeing it with Alexandria. You will see other synods. You will see Orthodox churches do it, and then you'll see some who don't. Another internal division within Orthodoxy, bolstered by specific efforts within the Alexandrian Patriarchate. Ample evidence testifies to the deaconesses in the ancient world. We all agree on that. It's just, again, whether or not they're sacramental or not is the question. Including scripture, canon, law, correspondence, and archaeological epithets and ordination rites. The office of deaconess in the Christian East fell out of use in the late Byzantine era for a variety of reasons, as did the office of deacon. So kind of like with the Roman Rite, there was kind of a falling away of the diaconate. You would have it as a transitional thing, but a permanent diaconate, well, Orthodoxy, the Eastern churches have kind of had the same struggle. Who became little more than liturgical assistants. The Orthodox Church worldwide has been asking for the restoration of deaconesses for years, including the Inner Orthodox Rhodes Consultation in 1988 and statements from the Ecumenical Patriarchate, that's Constantinople, in 2020. Many conferences and events dedicated to the restoration of deaconesses have taken place, including those sponsored by a nonprofit formed in 2013 to educate and advocate for deaconesses, the St. Phoebe Center for the Deaconesses, of which I am currently chair. The Holy Synod of Alexandria followed an orderly process of discernment on the restoration of this ordained order, inspired by many calls for deaconesses, including the Rhodes Consultation. In 2016, the Synod unanimously voted to begin the process. Listen to this. Partly motivated by the affirmation in documents from the Holy and Great Council of Crete in 2016. Let me stop there. That's a mic drop moment. You remember 2016? The Holy and Great Council? It took over 100 years for Orthodoxy to call this council because they have such an inability to get together in the same room to have a discussion. They've been calling for it for over 100 years for them to all come down, sit together, and kind of have a council. It didn't really pan out well because Moscow sabotaged it. And along with it no longer participating, some others didn't participate. So some of the Orthodox participated in the council that took over 100 years to call. Right at the end, Moscow pulls out, as well as a few others. So when the council actually assembled, you didn't have representatives from all of Orthodoxy. So a lot of Orthodox say, this isn't authoritative in nature. And there is a debate in Orthodoxy on what actually is authoritative as far as a council. But some said, this isn't authoritative. Constantinople said, this thing is ecumenical. I actually remember seeing a representative from Constantinople calling it ecumenical. So some are saying it's an ecumenical council. Some are saying, no, it's not. It's just a pan-Orthodox synod. Some are saying, no, it's none of the above. Some are saying it's authoritative. Some are saying it's not. It's a huge mess, but there hasn't been a whole lot of results from the 2016 council, regardless of what you think about it. Except for this, and this isn't what I expected. Evidently, Alexandria is saying, hey, we're going ahead with women deacons, and we're attributing that in part to the 2016 Holy and Great Council in Crete. Again, Moscow doesn't recognize it because it's a project of Constantinople, and they're usually at odds with them. And it raises questions like, who can call a pan-Orthodox synod? What is a pan-Orthodox synod? Is it authoritative? Is it not? Is it not? Who needs to be there to represent a church? Is it just a representative? Is it just the head of the synod? Or is it, every bishop in the world has to be present? There's huge debates here. So this is one of the problems of Eastern Orthodox ecclesiology, is just determining what a pan-Orthodox synod is, and then even having one. Well, they're giving a reference to 2016 to say, in part, we're doing this because 2016 Holy and Great Council in Crete. I thought that was interesting. By the affirmation in documents from the Holy and Great Council of Crete in 2016 of the ability of autocephalous or local Orthodox churches, such as the Alexandrian Patriarchate, to minister to local needs. So they're saying, look, 2016 says we have our ability to minister to our own local needs, which, why did you even need a council to say that? I didn't know that was in question. But evidently they needed to reassert that. Maybe there was some putting that into question. But they reasserted it, and they're saying, see, okay, well, we have a need for women deacons, so we're going to bring them back. By the way, I want to remind y'all, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. If you're new to this channel or you've been around and you've been enjoying the content here, hit that subscribe button. And also check out my book right here, Answering Orthodoxy, where I have responded to all of the main arguments that Eastern Orthodoxy use against the Catholic Church. Check it out right here. I especially cover issues like where in the early church and where the Orthodox have their councils actually affirming the papacy. So they're being inconsistent in rejecting the papacy. So check that out. All right. So it says this is an important point because the office of deaconess is part of the Orthodox tradition, has never been banned, and is not a doctrinal issue, but a pastoral one. See, I would say no. This isn't just a pastoral issue. It would be just pastoral if this were a non-sacramental diaconate. But since it appears to be, by all the evidence, sacramental. How do I know that? Because it's the exact same ordination ceremony for a male deacon, and she's doing everything that a male deacon does. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I mean, it's a duck, right? If it does everything that a sacramental deacon does, it's a distinction without a difference to say it's not sacramental, so it clearly is sacramental. So it's not just an issue of pastoral, it's doctrinal. And there's going to be some Orthodox who say, we don't believe that there can be this kind of women deacon. And so it's going to be a doctrinal controversy in Orthodoxy. But not only that, it's going to be an ecumenical issue because we in the Catholic Church don't accept the sacramentally ordained female deacons. We don't believe that that's possible. Pope Francis just recently reiterated it. I mean, look, maybe y'all didn't see this, but let me remind you. This is what Pope Francis just recently said.
For a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever participate as a clergy member in the church?
No. He shut that down. So again, Pope Francis has just said explicitly, no. And there's nothing in the Catholic Church that would indicate that the concept of deaconesses in the early church was sacramental. So the Catholic position is going to be, this isn't sacramental. Now, maybe we can talk about deaconesses that are not sacramental, and that would be a pastoral and prudential judgment. But this is more than that on part of Alexandria at this point, because it is clearly sacramental in nature. Unless they're saying that no deacon is sacramentally ordained. And at that point, that's still a doctrinal issue because in Catholicism, deacons, priests, and bishops are sacramentally ordained. So this is very much a doctrinal issue. I don't agree at all with the person who wrote this article. I think that that's going to be an obstacle for Catholic and Orthodox reunion. I mean, how do we negotiate reunions when we can't get basics together? We can't. We're not on the same page when it comes to the sacraments. Now, believe me, there's plenty of other issues that we still have to work through. I mean, Orthodox are still, in some places, rebaptizing people who are badly baptized. That's an issue we settled in like the 3rd century, 4th century in the Catholic Church. They're still struggling with that one because they don't have a magisterium. So there's plenty of other hurdles we have to get over. But this is just another one. So in addition to Moscow not recognizing Bulgaria, and further deepening divisions within Orthodoxy, there's now this doctrinal issue. How is this going to work? It's kind of like with Anglicanism, with their women priests and women bishops. That just makes it so much harder for us to ever talk about reunion with the Anglicans. We're starting to see that within Eastern Orthodoxy. But I will reiterate, I think it will take place slower. Modernizing within Orthodoxy is slower because it is less centralized. But because it doesn't have an actual magisterium at the end of the end of the day that can definitively shut these things down and shut these discussions down definitively in the way we did, for instance, with the Immaculate Conception. Because Orthodoxy doesn't have that, it will eventually succumb to the spirit of the age. It will take longer, though. Much slower than the Anglicans went. So it's never been banned, they said, and it is not a doctrinal issue. I don't agree with that. It is well within the purview of a local Orthodox church to ordain deaconesses based on the needs of its flock. Initially, and under threat of financial consequences for the Orthodox Church in Africa, women were consecrated, but they say not ordained by Patriarch Theodorus II. Well, okay, what's the evidence of that? Did he use some kind of different ceremony? Did he make that explicitly known? I still have a big question mark on that. But since I'm seeing what seems to be, in their mind, sacramental ordinations within Alexandria, I would say, why aren't these other ones considered that? Was it different? This was seen as a compromise, as the historical order itself was clearly an ordained role. So they're arguing historically deaconesses were actually sacramentally ordained. Again, there's going to be a lot of Catholics who don't agree. There's going to be a lot of Orthodox who don't agree. There's going to be Oriental Orthodox who don't agree with this. That's also going to impact Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox relations. The ordination of deaconess Angelic took place with the explicit blessing of Patriarch Theodorus II, and with the full support of St. Nectarius's mission clergy and faithful, and with the faith and confidence of Metropolitan Seraphim. Because Deaconess Angelic's ordination is first, it will likely prompt the clergy in Africa to consider standardizing the vetting and training of future deaconesses. There are already plans in place to ordain other women to the diaconate in Harare. So they got more planned here, more coming. And they're going to serve at St. Nectarius and at nearby parishes. The significance of the location and the day were clear. St. Nectarius of Aegina, Greece, ordained 2 nuns as deaconesses in the early 20th century, and Metropolitan Seraphim said that this was an important example for him. The liturgy on Holy Thursday commemorates, by the way, I didn't know that about Nectarius. The liturgy of Holy Thursday commemorates the institution of the Holy Eucharist and so on. Deaconess Angelic will naturally continue the ministries in which she already is engaged, catechesis and so on. What effect will her ordination have on other parts of Africa or the Orthodox Church around the world? It remains to be seen. But a powerful precedent has been established with the courage of Metropolitan Seraphim and the Alexandrian Patriarchate. Not only was a deaconess ordained, but the process happened in an impeccable manner. The ordination of Deaconess Angelic offers a sound precedent of good church order for other bishops in Africa to emulate, as well as other Orthodox synods around the world to consider. A bishop in America recently told me, this is an Orthodox bishop who said, someone needs to break the ice. Meaning that if one synod went ahead and bore the brunt of being the first group to take action on this issue, then other synods could and would follow. That's true. Now that they've broken that ice, you're going to see other synods and other bishops and other patriarchates doing this within Orthodoxy. Now, remember, in Orthodoxy, the question of women to the priesthood is still open, according to some Orthodox. Some Orthodox are going to say, no, it's closed. Others are going to say it's still open. There's nothing that can really definitively settle that question in Orthodoxy. So it's going to be an endless debate. But that's why you have, very prominent figures in Eastern Orthodoxy speaking about the possibility of women being ordained to the priesthood in Orthodoxy. Now that you see this with the diaconate, what will happen? You're likely going to see Orthodoxy over time and in other places have women deacons. What will then happen? The next step will be women to the priesthood. Because if you can sacramentally ordain women to the diaconate, why can't you sacramentally ordain them to the priesthood and then the episcopate? It's a legitimate question. If you could do this, why not the other grades to holy orders? The ice has been broken in Zimbabwe. It is my prayer that other synods will gather the courage and will ordain deaconesses in their own local churches. Metropolitan Seraphim said, the revival of the apostolic tradition of the institution of deaconesses is the missionary ministry of our church. No one can stop it because it has as its source the Holy Spirit itself, who healed the sick and found the missing. So they're claiming, hey, the Holy Spirit is behind these ordinations, and nobody can stop it, whether you like it or not. Another important precedent is that Deaconess Angelica is 33 years old, married, and has 2 children. Now, in Orthodoxy, as well as in the Eastern churches, Eastern Catholic churches, if you are married, you can become sacramentally ordained as a male, by the way, only a male can be sacramentally ordained a deacon or even a priest, not a bishop. And that's by way of discipline. That's a discipline. However, after you've received the sacramental character of ordination, you can't get married after that. So if your spouse dies, you can't get married again or something like that. Deaconesses in the ancient world were generally, but not always, unmarried and older, and there are canons that state that the deaconess ought to be older than 40, and in some cases 60. Now, with Orthodoxy, they have this very loose flexibility with many of these canons, and it's kind of up to the local bishop in some cases to determine how rigorous he's going to be in the application of a canon. These and other canons relating to age of ordination have always been understood as guidelines. Again, it's not like in the Catholic Church with the Code of Canon Law. You know, the only one who can kind of really bend or even throw out a canon is the Pope, because he's the promulgator of the Code of Canon Law. But other than that, you know, clergy kind of have to stick to what canon law says, unless there's something else that allows for some flexibility. Now, there is some flexibility within canon law, but if there's a clear-cut canon, there's not as much wiggle room in the Catholic Church as there would be a canon in Eastern Orthodoxy. Many of the canons in Orthodoxy are just dead canons. They don't even apply to today because they were maybe a canon from 1400 years ago in a different part of the world that doesn't even apply to today. So they don't have the kind of canonical system that we do today. These and other canons relating to the age of ordination have always been understood as guidelines. The canons also state that men should be at least 30 to be ordained as priests, though example abound of younger priests. When asked about the issue of age, Metropolitan Seraphim stressed the ordination is less about the letter of the law and more about the spirit. Again, more wiggle room in Orthodoxy when it comes to applications of canons. Maybe in some cases that's a good thing. Maybe in other cases that's a very bad thing. It certainly is going to be less uniformity across the board in Orthodoxy. Deaconess Angelica already has a diaconal ministry and is deemed spiritually prepared and well suited for ordination, so the church ought to ordain her now rather than waiting for her to turn 40. I rejoice in this detail because there are those who wish to see deaconesses in the Orthodox Church but believe they should only be older women and possibly only monastic women. I think that they wrote this before the service. Many of the women doing similar diaconal work elsewhere in the world are also younger and often have families. It makes good sense to ordain these women rather than wait for an arbitrary age. As noted, Deaconess Angelica was ordained with the same prayers on the books as for a deacon, and she is already serving liturgically in the same capacity as her male counterparts, which I want to say, okay, you already have admitted that. You know, the person who's writing this article, you're admitting that. So it's clearly sacramental. It's not just a prudential and pastoral issue. It's a doctrinal one. Even as this is the case, there is no erasure of gender going on. It is very much expected that Deaconess Angelica will bring her feminine perspectives and gifts to the ministry, and it should be noted that the Zimbabwean culture is highly gender-bound. Her dignity as a woman is very being honored through ordination, not compromised. Okay. Reactions, as one might imagine, there have been a variety of reactions in the wake of the ordination of Deaconess Angelic. Most reactions are positive, if not overjoyed. In the days of the ordination, I received notes from around the world celebrating the Holy Spirit at work and proclaiming a renewal of hope. Well, that's just one group. There will be plenty of others who claim to be Eastern Orthodox. Whether or not they're in communion with this patriarchate is a different question, but there will be plenty of other Eastern Orthodox who say, no, this is absolute heresy. This is ridiculous. This is not legitimate. This is just modernism. This is a group of orthodoxy that's going woke. This is liberalism. This is blah, blah, blah. There's going to be Orthodox who oppose this. Your orthobros are going to generally be very opposed to this. Your orthobros online are going to pretend like this isn't happening. They're just going to pretend like it doesn't exist. Or they'll just say, oh, that's not real orthodoxy, which kind of brings us to the true orthodoxy movement, where you find many people who have left canonical orthodoxy for true orthodoxy. So they're not in communion with what we would consider to be the Orthodox Church, but they claim to be Orthodox, and they kind of have their own schismatic bishops. It's like the Orthodox version of sedevacantism. They claim to be Catholic, but they're not in communion with the Catholic Church. Well, you're going to have your true Orthodox who claim to be Orthodox, but they're not in communion with the Eastern Orthodox, but they claim to be the real Eastern Orthodox. They're going to say, look, see, this is another example of how world orthodoxy is actually compromising to the spirit of the age. Ergo, we're the true Orthodox. They're not real Orthodox. You're going to have that. This is going to feed more into that group. And I suspect you're going to start to see many people start to join, as we see this more and more prevalent in Orthodoxy. You're going to see many people start to join true Orthodoxy. A common refrain was that people, women and men, cried when they heard the news. For many Orthodox Christians, this news comes with joy, but also some relief. Relief that our community is finally coming to its senses. Other Orthodox seem surprised but interested. There are still a lot of people who do not know about the history of the order of deaconesses or the possibility for deaconesses today. Right. There's going to be plenty who say, no, this doesn't apply to today, or this isn't even possible. You can't have a sacramental or ordination of women. There's also naysayers. Many of them are vitriolic and aggressive. This is unfortunate, but not surprising, and the only thing to be done is pray for their souls. Some naysayers are more respectful, but spread downright incorrect information and opinions. For example, the false claim that women were never ordained to the diaconate in the ancient world, but only consecrated. The fact that deaconesses were ordained has been clearly established by scholars like Dr. Carras and Dr. Evangelos Theodoro. So again, internal debate within Orthodoxy and even outside of Orthodoxy. Another false claim is that the movement for deaconesses around the world is motivated by concerns for secular feminism. While there is no doubt that the cultural changes of our era bring questions to the church about the role of women, the movement of deaconesses is coming from faithful Orthodox Christians, women, and men who wish to build a better future for the Orthodox Church. Now, there's going to be plenty of Orthodox who say, no, these aren't faithful Orthodox. They're schismatics, and they're heretics, and they're liberals, and they're woke, and they're blah, blah, blah. And they see a hope in the possibility of renewing the entire order of the diaconate, women and men, in order for the church to serve its people and the world. Again, I have to say, this is going to be a massive barrier for reunion between Catholics and Orthodox. And once you've bought into this, there's no way to say no to women to the priesthood and women to the episcopate. No real way to say no. You might say, well, it doesn't practically work today, but in theory, you could have it. And eventually you will. Because why? The spirit of the age is pushing for it. With that kind of pressure, eventually you're going to have some caving in. We're starting to see Orthodox countries caving into the modern world. We saw Greece recently, even though the episcopate is opposed to it. We saw Greece recently legalize same-sex marriage. So you're starting to see some of these Orthodox countries become more and more secularized. Now, again, you're going to have the episcopate in some cases opposing it. But what happens when eventually they end up becoming secularized? You don't ultimately have a magisterium that can shut the door on this and say absolutely no. So eventually there's going to be more and more and more caving in and giving into these things. So this is certainly a cause for concern, and it will be interesting to see how other Orthodox react to this and how the situation develops. Again, reminding y'all of this book over here. See how to point to that. Hold on. There we go. Answering Orthodoxy that I wrote. Certainly check it out. It is on Amazon, and it will address many of the objections that Eastern Orthodoxy has against Catholicism. Look at the trolls in the chat doing their best to try to cope with this. Lofton is coping hard. He can't pope-splain anymore, looking bad, so he's now attacking Orthodoxy. You're a perfect example of the very thing that you claim. You're coping with what I'm presenting to you. I presented facts. You couldn't engage the facts, so you had to try to gaslight us by saying, I'm the one coping. That's, again, called projection. You're the one coping here. Now, going to return here in just a moment, right after this message, and we will continue with a brief commentary on NASA and its promotion of Pride Month. But right after this.
Hey friends, are you thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. In this book, I engage all of the objections that Eastern Orthodox have against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them, refute them, and I show why the Catholic Church alone possesses the fullness of the faith. Get your copy today at shop.catholic.com.
Hey friends, I'm now teaching as an adjunct professor at Catholic Polytechnic University, and I am excited to announce that we will be offering the first ever Magisterial Studies Certificate program. It consists of 3 courses: an introduction to the magisterium, councils, dogmas, canons, and decrees, and evaluating magisterial teachings. If you want to further your education and learn more about Catholic teaching authority, this is the program for you. Check out catholicpolytechnic.org and click on the certificate tab at the top to sign up for the course today.
Have you ever heard someone say that Pope Francis denied the existence of hell, or Pope Francis worshipped an idol in the Vatican gardens? There are many claims that have been made about Pope Francis for over a decade, and many of them are inaccurate. I've set the record straight in my free ebook called Top 10 Lies About Pope Francis Exposed. Get your free copy today by visiting reason.podia.com. So I saw something odd from NASA. I say odd. I suppose it should be expected. Where they're promoting Pride Month, which is truly, truly unfortunate. You know, it's funny that you don't see NASA and groups like that promoting, I don't know, the day Jesus rose from the dead or the day Jesus, was born. You don't see that. You don't see them celebrating that, but they will celebrate things like Pride Month. And let's take a look at why they are doing this. And by the way, again, I want to remind y'all, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We just reached 100,000 subscribers. Thank y'all so much for everybody who has been supporting the show. But let's continue to hit that subscribe button so we can continue to reach new people with this message. And if you've really benefited from the content of this channel, go ahead and do it now. Take a moment to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Now, this is what they posted. And it says, as we mark the start of Pride Month, isn't this the month of the Sacred Heart? Stop it. We're reflecting on how far we've come while recognizing the work still to be done. There's space for everyone, all genders and orientations, in exploration and discovery. All right, look. And this is what I posted on my Twitter in response. In fact, I'll share it. You should be ashamed, NASA. This month isn't about making space for everyone. It's about normalizing sin. Look, making space for everyone in the workspace or being welcoming, stuff like that, that's something else. That's not what Pride Month is. And we all know it. It's not just about, oh, we recognize the dignity of somebody, or we give, everybody an opportunity in the workspace. Come on now. That is not what Pride Month is. Pride Month is the open, explicit celebration of a sin that goes against the will of God, a sin of one's own body and a sin against God. And it's the normalizing of this sin. So when you throw in your lot with this, you're not just saying, hey, I'm in favor of treating people with dignity and respect. You're saying, no, I'm in favor of these acts and normalizing them. That's the problem here. I am all in favor of being respectful to people who are struggling with sin, no matter what that sin is. That's everybody. Everybody, we're all struggling with some kind of sin. And so I'm all respectful and being compassionate to people. I'm all in favor of people who are struggling with same-sex attraction or acting on same-sex attraction to come to the church. Please come to the church. You need to be at church. That's exactly where you need to be. I'm all about welcoming them, because the gospel is for everybody. The good news is for everyone. Grace is for everyone. The healing that's found in Jesus Christ is for everyone. So that's not it. That's not the point. All about being welcoming, recognizing people's dignity, being respectful, providing opportunity, whatever. That's not the issue. That's not the problem. The problem is normalizing sin, and we all know it. Are you seeing from Pride Month, hey, let's just be respectful and welcoming and make sure that people have equal opportunities? Is that what you're seeing? No, with every kind of advertisement, from everything from the Pride community. It's not that message. It's the message of, we're going to shove this down your throat and make you accept this act and the normalization of this. You have to embrace this doctrine, they're saying. It's not good enough to just recognize people, in the workspace or something. That's not their goal here. They want you to accept the actions. That's what it is. And you know what it reminds me of? That verse from Romans 1. Watch this. Yeah, that same Romans 1 that condemns same-sex acts. Watch this. Let me show you what it says. Here's the kicker when it comes to Romans 1. God gave them over to shameful lust. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones, lesbianism. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another, sodomy. Men committed shame acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. So it's condemning homosexual acts. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They became filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, depravity, envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. This sounds like it's a description of the Pride movement. Frankly, they invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. Now, here's the kicker. Although they knew or know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death. And by the way, in 1 Corinthians, it also says eternal damnation, the lake of fire. They not only continue to do these very things, but here's the kicker. They approve of those who practice them. They not only do these things, they want to then also approve of others who practice them. And what are we seeing today? Oh, it's not good enough for you to just tolerate in the workplace people who flaunt certain things in front of your face. No. It's not good enough to just tolerate it. You have to approve of it. That's the agenda of Pride Month. approving of sin. That's the agenda. So when I saw stuff like that, it's just kind of sad seeing it. But it's become incredibly common, unfortunately. And we need to keep the discussion where it really is. Does God approve of this? Is this good for you? No. You can know that by the natural law, and you can know that by divine revelation. And again, it's not about welcoming people, being loving to people, equal opportunities in the workplace. That's not what the issue really is. The issue is they want you to accept sin and to say that sin is no longer sin, to say that evil is good. That's what they want you to do. And that's where we need to have the discussion. We're not going to do it. Not going to accept it. Y'all hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Of course, check me out at patreon.com/reason and theology. If you have appreciated the content on this channel, if you benefit from it, and you want to get access to extra content. There's plenty of extra stuff that I give to patrons. If you join on Patreon or here on YouTube as a channel member or locals, there's plenty of extra content that I give just to those patrons. I also give some insider information, so there's extra stuff that you'll become privy to whenever you join in those discussions. I'm putting out a lot of extra content, so certainly check it out. Let me take a couple questions. Do you believe that centuries later, when Orthodoxy deviates significantly from the faith while Rome remains faithful? I'm sorry, they've already done that. They've already deviated from multiple dogmas and their own ecumenical councils. Remains faithful. This alone will be a sign for people to return to Rome. This and many others. I mean, the big one for me is they've abandoned their own ecumenical councils that teach the Catholic doctrine of the papacy. That's a death blow to Orthodoxy. Why does Michael block so many people on X? I only block trolls. And you know you're trolling. Okay, let's see what else we got. I'm thinking about leaving Eastern Orthodoxy for Catholicism, but I don't like the Novus Ordo. It's not holy at all. I would continue to encourage to look more into the Roman Rite. I would never say it's not holy, no matter what the form of the Roman Rite. Now, there could be some instances where you have abuses of the Novus Ordo, but that's not the Novus Ordo. That's an abuse. So I would certainly continue to investigate, look into that more, because that's I would say that's not accurate. More importantly than those questions is going to be, which church did Jesus establish and which does he expect you to be in communion with? If the papacy is true and Jesus established the papacy, which your own ecumenical councils teach, your own ecumenical councils teach that. If that's true, then you have no other choice but to be Catholic, because if you're not Catholic, you're outside of the will of God. That's the bigger issue that I think you need to focus on. But stick around the channel. We got plenty of content for you that will help you work through some of these questions. Let's see what else we got here. Looking through the chat. Let's see. See a lot of conversations going on in the chat. I'm looking something specifically for me, though. Pride is the root of sin. Pride comes before the fall. Yes. But I would say the bigger issue with Pride Month is not the sin of pride, although that is involved. It's the sin of lust. It's first and foremost the sin of lust. And yes, there's also some pride because it's a rebellion against God in his will for one's life. Sacred Heart of Jesus is greater than Pride Month. Yeah. It's so funny that they have to take over, good things and somehow replace them with something evil. But that's exactly what Satan does. So no, we're not celebrating Pride Month. We will celebrate the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It's really sad, however. Satan is really desperate to continue to fight against his creator. And we're seeing that here. Let's see. Okay. A lot of comments. Who is that in the opening of my intro? Great question. You're talking about Pope Leo the Great. Let me show it real quick. That, I'm sorry, not Pope Leo the Great. No, he's going to be 400s. Pope Leo the 13th. we can maybe say he's the great, but not the great. Yeah, Pope Leo the 13th. He is the oldest person ever filmed on video, which is why I have that on there. There's a few other clips of him. Oldest person ever filmed on video, Pope Leo the 13th. Epic papacy. Very prolific. Very good papacy. Can we not already say there are multiple Eastern Orthodoxies? Yes, there are multiple Eastern Orthodoxies. How long until they get new names? Whenever you have a full schism. Right now, these are still partial schisms because some still recognize both, even though, some of these others don't recognize each other or something, but you have partial schisms. Whenever it turns into a full schism, then you will have new names. Although they might still, each group still tries to call themselves Eastern Orthodox. Look, we're the Orthodox, the Catholic Church. We're the Catholic Church. We are the Orthodox Church. Now, the Eastern Orthodox claim to be the Orthodox Church. They claim to be Catholic, and so we come up with terms like Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. We come up with these terms, but people still try to retain these names even after they schism. Orthodoxy still calls itself the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, but we're the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. They still call themselves the Orthodox, but we're the Orthodox. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works. Unfortunately, I think it will come to that, though. Okay. I respect and know the Novus Ordo is legitimate, but people easily abuse it. And that's the real issue. I love seeing a Novus Ordo with ad orientem and reverence can be just as good as the Missal 62. Right. I agree with you. Absolutely. And that's what we need to see more of. How can they be apostolic without the Pope? Well, apostolic only insofar as they have ordinations that traces back to the apostles, but not the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. They're not apostolic in that sense. They're not the Apostolic Church. They're only apostolic insofar as they retain ordinations. But from their perspective, they are the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. But we would say they're wrong. How do we know they're wrong? Well, they've admitted in their own ecumenical councils that the papacy is a divine institution and it's indefectible. There's no way around that. If the papacy is a divine institution, it's created by God. And if it's indefectible, there's never a reason for you to break communion with that which God has established and is indefectible. So the Sixth Ecumenical Council, the Seventh Ecumenical Council, the Fourth Ecumenical Council that teach those things, well, there's no way around that. If their own councils are true, and they claim they are, then they have to be Catholic. So there is an inconsistency here, an internal inconsistency. Again, I talk about that, especially in this book right here, Answering Orthodoxy. I give you all of the evidence. I go over the materials, so certainly check it out. James's interviews, currently reading your book, Answering Orthodoxy. That's awesome. Let me know what you think about it when you're done. Thank you. Thank you for getting that and checking it out. I heard the following argument for being the one true church from Orthodoxy. Even the Roman Catholic call us Orthodox. Even they call us Catholic. That's again equivocating on what the term Orthodox or Catholic mean. They are not the Orthodox. They are Orthodox insofar as the term designated those who accepted the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea in 325, those who accepted it were called Orthodox. Those who didn't accept it weren't called the Orthodox. we can call them Orthodox in that sense, insofar as they accept the Council of Nicaea, but so are the Assyrian Church of the East and Oriental Orthodox. They're playing little word games is what they're doing, and they're clearly ignorant as to what is being said here. Catholic Church still teaches and will always teach, because it's a dogma, that we are the church established by Jesus Christ, and the fullness of the faith is in us. The church subsists in the Catholic Church alone, not in Orthodoxy. It's not branch theory. It's alone in the Catholic Church, fully subsists. Now, elements of the Catholic Church exist outside of that one true church. So valid sacraments, apostolic succession, the preaching of the gospel. There's elements that exist outside of the fullness of the faith. Okay. Which council proclaimed the primacy of Rome? It must be after Chalcedon, see Canon 23, so maybe the 6th. Well, I engaged the issues of the canons at Chalcedon, also Constantinople 1, which are relevant here, in the book Answering Orthodoxy, right over here. And you ask which. I, again, have multiple videos on this very question. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but I have a playlist on Answering Orthodoxy that will go into this in detail. I am specifically referring to the Sixth Ecumenical Council, but also aspects of Ephesus, which is the Third Ecumenical Council, Chalcedon, the Fourth Ecumenical Council. There's some interesting aspects of the Fifth Ecumenical Council that point to Catholicism, despite objections from some of the sessions, and some of the issues related to Vigilius. Again, the Sixth Ecumenical Council with Agatho's letter, also the Seventh Ecumenical Council with Hadrian's letters. So you'll want to get the book Answering Orthodoxy that goes into details. Also check out the videos in the playlist that I have here for Eastern Orthodoxy on the channel for free that goes into details there as well. Can't reproduce the whole thing in this video. I can point you, however, to those videos where I go over it thoroughly. In fact, one video you'll really want to watch is going to be this one, because it engages a question that I think Orthodox cannot answer. Even this Orthodox professor, best that he gave me didn't work, and I'll show you something that they just simply have no way to address. Let me pull it up. Let me find it. Just trying to recall the title. 1 second. All right, let me go to the playlists. Eastern Orthodoxy. Let me share my screen. All right, it is going to be... Let's see. One argument Eastern Orthodox can't answer. Please check out that video. My response to an Orthodox professor. One argument Eastern Orthodox can't answer. Watch that video, wrestle with it, and it also addresses the question of Honorius that shows it's actually in favor of Catholicism, not Eastern Orthodoxy. All right, so everybody hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as I said before, check me out at patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support the channel, and get Answering Orthodoxy if you want a thorough rebuttal to the stuff that you're going to see from Eastern Orthodoxy in response or reaction and in an attempt to refute Catholicism. All right, see you later. God bless.
Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.
Hey friends, are you thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. In this book, I engage all of the objections that Eastern Orthodox have against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them, refute them, and I show why the Catholic Church alone possesses the fullness of the faith. Get your copy today at shop.catholic.com.
Conference for more details.